move about.
On Thorn Farm, there's a field called Orstone. The River Quorn runs along the bottom of it, and in the middle of this field is a great big flint stone, having a man's head and wide in proportion. The legend says that the old gentleman was down on Winsford Hill trying to throw stones up to Dunkery Beacon, but this one pitched a bit short. But the legend says that every morning when the cock crows first, this stone goes down to the river to drink.
Another popular tradition is that groups of stones are impossible to count, and this is said to be true of Stanton Drew in Somerset, the Rollright Stones in the Cotswolds, Little Kit's Coty, which is actually called the Countless Stones, near Maidstone in Kent, and Stonehenge again. I'm not sure actually how the legend came about, but perhaps it's something to do with the old stories of stones moving around at night, or maybe it's related to the idea that if you have knowledge of something or someone, you have a certain power over them. So if you know someone's name, like in the Tom Tit Tot story, it means you can control that person. So if someone actually managed to count the stones correctly, it might possibly give them power over whatever spirit guarded the stones. Anyway, whatever lies behind the legend, people have obviously taken it very seriously, and in fact they still do. In fact, after the Battle of Worcester, Charles II spent a whole day trying to count the stones at Stonehenge, unsuccessfully, I'm afraid. Samuel Pepys tried to do it, and so did John Evelyn. But although all these famous historical characters had a go, the hero of the folk tale who tries to count them is usually a baker. At the Rollright Stones, he trundled out with a barrow-load of steaming bread, intending to put one loaf on each stone. Then he'd gather up all the loaves at the end and find out exactly how many stones he'd put loaves on. But unfortunately, as he crept round putting the loaves out, the devil crept along behind him taking them up. And when the baker finished and turned round to find his loaves gone, he freaked. He grabbed his barrow and ran and was never seen there again. At the Maidstone Countless Stones, there's a similar story about a baker, but here the baker goes all the way around putting one loaf on each stone, and when he got to the end, he was just about to shout out the magic number when he dropped dead, so we still don't know how many there are. You see, it's very dangerous to try and get one over on the stones.
In fact, Dave and I have tried to count those particular stones on a number of occasions, and I'm afraid it's always ended up with a row, which only goes to show that you shouldn't mess about with landmarks. All over the country you'll find people who will tell you of a farmer who takes a large stone away from its proper site to mend a farm building or something, but the stone only brings him bad luck. In these tales, it usually takes at least 2 horses to drag and pull the stone downhill to the farm. When the farmer decides to return it to the original site, just one horse is able to gallop off up the hill with it. Mr. and Mrs. Jack White from Stannington in Yorkshire have their own family version of the story, which involves tombstones taken from the Quakers' burial ground.
My grandparents, they had a farm just down the road here called Brookside Farm, yes. And they wanted a new stone bench for their cellar. 2 of the farm men, they went and took 2 horses to fetch a slab out of the Quakers' burial ground, you see. And they brought it home to my grandparents, and they fixed it up in the cellar. But everything that my grandma put on this bench went sour. Milk, cream, everything. Turned sour. And she was so upset about it, she said she wanted it fetching out and taking back. And one horse took it back, and galloped all the way.
I suppose that story, like the one about the petrified dancers, is a moralistic tale about breaking a taboo. In this case, the taboo of desecrating burial places. I asked Dave what other sort of purpose this kind of folk tale can serve.
Apart from any moral implications, there were the cautionary tales, which were perhaps used by parents, which were useful in that they kept kids away from dangerous areas. For example, in Leicestershire, in the Dane Hills, there's a legend of a sort of demon called Black Annis that would grab children and scratch them to death, and then she'd drink their blood and eat their flesh and hang their skin up in her cave to dry. I should think a story like that is a very good way of keeping kids away from dangerous places. And up in Lancashire, there's another sort of cautionary tale of a character called Jenny Greenteeth, or Ginny Greenteeth, It was originally a spirit of the rivers and lakes, and I would imagine it was a very good thing to tell kids, if you go near the river or you go near the lake, Ginny Greenteeth will get you. Because I remember when I was a kid in Cheshire, in fact Ginny Greenteeth strayed down into Cheshire, my father used her to keep me away from the railway. If I went down to the railway embankment, Ginny Greenteeth would get me, so I didn't go anywhere near there. I had this terrible picture of this awful crone with green teeth sort of lurking down by the railway line waiting to grab me, so I kept as far away as possible. So I suppose from that point of view, there are often very good social reasons why tales and legends become associated with particular geographical areas.
My childhood was spent in South London, and I didn't have a Ginny Greenteeth. I had a bogeyman as my figure of social control. When he could no longer threaten me, the man from the school board took his place. Unlike the poor old school board man, Ginny Greenteeth probably had her origins, as Dave said, in some pre-Christian water divinity. These local spirits of rivers, springs and wells were frequently ousted by the church, who rededicated the sites to Christian saints and martyrs. A famous Irish healing well, dedicated to St. Patrick, is the Doon Well. Belle Stewart from Scotland learned about the legend of the Doon Well many years ago when she was doing seasonal work with her family.
This is a story that I was told in Ireland, and it is definitely supposed to be true. As a matter of fact, I have had a drink out of the water of this mineral well, which is called the Doon Well at Kilmachrenan. That's the name of the well. Well, the legend goes that St. Patrick, as you all know, was a very blessed man in Ireland, at least we've been told so. And he'd been going round about the people of the wee villages and the cottages, you know. He used to go, as far as I'm led to believe, he used to go and visit them periodically. But this night, anyway, he was coming back home and he'd cross a bog. And he's walking across this bog, you know, and it got terribly misty and foggy. He just could not see where he was going. And he more or less lost his way. But he always had his staff with him, which we called St. Patrick's staff. Which was a stick, you know, a crooked stick like a shepherd's crooked stick. You know, bog is very soft, like marshy sort of ground, and the staff had stuck in the bog and he couldn't find it in the dark. He just could not find his staff.
A little later, an old woman was walking along the bog with a great sack of peat on her back, and when she saw St. Patrick's staff stuck in the ground, she pulled it out and used it to help her walk home. Next morning, when she got up, the mist had cleared, and she could see in the distance a fountain of water. So she took the staff down from behind the door and went to investigate. When she reached the spring, she saw the hole in the ground, and so she put the staff in the hole. It fitted perfectly.
So she realised then that that's where St. Patrick's staff had been. So, a lot of them all gathered round about. You know, this is quite a thing to see this water spouting up. Somebody, I didn't know who it was, but there was a whole lot of people there, and they thought they would take a drink. And strangely enough, the person that took a drink was a lassie that had been crippled for years, a young lassie. They were all standing round this place, and she took a drink of the water in her hands, put her hands in the well and took a drink of the water. And she stood up, and she never realised until she was back up on the road that she was no longer lame. She wasn't lame any longer when she took. So they put this down that it must have been the water. Now, this is a fact, for I've been at the well. I've had a drink of the well. This is definitely no lie or no carried story. And I was expecting my second baby at the time. And it would be about 3 weeks before Cathy was due to be born. And I took a drink of that water. And I can safely say, and I wasn't a believer in any of these things, that it was worse having a tooth pulled than having Cathy. It was the most pleasant birth that I ever had of all the rest of my family. Putting it down to the water, I don't know. We're not saying it was, but I had a drink of that water, and I asked God to bless me, and drank the water there. Alex's mother was with me at the time. Went into the cottage where the old woman lived, and we had our tea there, and was talking to the old woman about this water. Now, for half a mile and more, before you go to this well, the Doon Well, there's staffs, there's crutches, there's the bandages, but you're not allowed to go down to the well and use it there. You have to take a basin of water, and if you've got a sore or an ailment or anything, you know, you wash it in this water. So that was the legend of St. Patrick's staff.
One final feature of the landscape that has always aroused tall tales and superstitious beliefs is the burial mounds of the dead. In folk tales, as we've seen, the world of the dead and the world of magic are frequently one and the same thing, and there are many tales of mortals being taken into the burial mounds by the fairies. They can weave countless illusions, and within the burial mounds, human time is suspended, and what feels like one night can turn out to have lasted 7 years, or perhaps even longer, as 2 fiddlers discovered in Inverness. These 2 itinerant musicians arrived in Inverness looking for work, and were immediately approached by a richly dressed old man who employed them to play at a great party. He led them out of town until they arrived at the gate of a magnificent castle. They entered an exquisite ballroom packed with fine ladies and gentlemen, who encouraged the fiddlers to play their fastest jigs and reels. They'd never seen such dancing or heard such singing as they did that night.
And the night went like a flash, and in the morning their guide gave them money and thanked them. They were fed and they were taken out. But when they got out, they found themselves, instead of walking through a gate, crawling out. And when they looked back, they found it was a great funeral mound that they'd been in. They made their way into the streets of Inverness, and everyone in it stared at these 2 old men in their antique clothes. And at last someone came up to them and asked them what they needed, and they told him that they'd gone the night before to play in a castle near. Oh, they said, that's Tomin too. That's the home of the dead. When did you go? Last night. Why are you wearing those strange old clothes? And then someone else came up and said, I know who they are. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, his father and his father again gave a lodging to 2 famous fiddlers 200 years ago, and they disappeared. They went with an old man. Thank God you've come out safe, because some never come back. So that moment the Sabbath bells rang for church, and the 2 fiddlers, filled with joy at their escape, went to church. And when the minister opened the Bible with the first words he spoke, they crumbled into dust before his eyes.